In the middle of a busy city, there was a small restaurant that looked fancy from the outside. It had glass windows, soft yellow lights, and a warm atmosphere. Rich people, business workers, and couples came there to eat and talk. Everything always looked perfect: clean tables, shining glasses, and calm music playing in the background. But behind all of that was a quiet waitress named Emily, who most people never noticed. Emily was in her early 20s. She wore the same black and white uniform every day. Her dark brown hair was tied back neatly, and her shoes were old but polished. She wasn't loud or chatty like some of the other waiters. She did her job quietly, smiled at customers, and always said thank you and have a nice day. Most people didn't even read her name tag. To them, she was just the waitress, someone who brought food, filled water glasses, and cleaned up after them. But Emily had her own story, a story nobody knew. She had once dreamed of playing the piano on a big stage. When she was younger, she had taken music lessons every week. Her fingers used to dance on the piano keys like they had a life of their own. She could read music like reading words in a book. Her teacher used to call her a gift. She had won small competitions, and her parents were proud. But everything changed when her father got sick. The hospital bills started growing, and her mother had to take extra jobs. Emily stopped her piano lessons, and they had to sell the piano. After that, her dream stayed locked inside her heart like a song that was never finished. Now, she worked at the restaurant 6 days a week. Her shift started in the afternoon and ended late at night. The job was tiring, but she didn't complain. She needed to help her mother with rent, groceries, and bills. She never had time for music anymore. The only piano she saw was the one standing in the corner of the restaurant, told, dusty and silent. That piano had been there for years. Nobody played it. Maybe once in a while, during a birthday dinner, a child would press a few keys. But mostly, it just sat there like a decoration, covered in dust and forgotten. Sometimes when she passed by it during her shift, Emily would glance at it. Her fingers would twitch like they remembered how to play. But she never dared to sit there. That part of her life felt too far away. One evening, a group of people walked into the restaurant. They were loud and dressed in designer clothes. Some of them were local influencers, people who made videos online and had lots of followers. Others were just regular rich kids who liked to show off. There were 6 of them in total for girls, and 2 guys. They laughed loudly as they entered, not caring that other customers were trying to enjoy a quiet dinner. Emily walked up to them with a polite smile and said, "Good evening. Would you like to sit near the window or in the back?" Of the girls giggled and said loudly, "We'll sit where the lighting is good. I need to film my pasta." The others laughed. Emily led them to a table near the window, handed them menus, and said, "Please let me know if you have any questions." As she walked away, she could hear them whispering behind her, "She talks like a robot. Did you see her shoes? So cheap. She looks like she hasn't slept in a week." They laughed again. Emily heard every word, but she kept walking. She had learned to swallow those words like bitter medicine. This wasn't the first time someone had spoken badly about her. She had waited on all kinds of people, kind, rude, impatient, and spoiled. Always kept her head down and did her job. When she brought their drinks, one of the guys looked at her and said, "Do you ever smile for real? Or is it always this fake one?" The others laughed again. Emily smiled the same polite smile and replied, "Is there anything else I can get you?" They weren't interested in the food or drinks. They were more interested in making jokes, taking photos, and mocking others. One girl accidentally dropped her fork and called Emily over. "Oops, I dropped it. Can you pick it up for me?" she said in a fake sweet voice. Emily bent down and picked up the fork. "Oh wow," one of the guys said. "She actually did it?" So obedient. Emily said nothing. Her ears were burning and her hands were shaking a little. But she walked away calmly. In the kitchen, she leaned against the wall for a second and closed her eyes. She told herself to breathe. Just breathe. This job was important. She couldn't risk losing it. People would always talk. It didn't matter. She just had to finish her shift and go home. But something about this group felt worse than usual. Their words were sharper. Their laughter was meaner. They didn't care if she heard them. To them, she was just a background character in their night out. Later that evening, they began talking about the piano. Double quotes, "Hey, is that real?" Of them asked loudly, pointing toward the old piano in the corner. "I think so. I mean, it has keys. Let's go take a selfie with it." Two of the girls stood next to it, pretending to play while their friends took photos. One of the guys said, "Hey, waitress, can you play this thing?" Emily had just walked by to serve another table. She froze for a second, then turned and said softly, "No, I don't play anymore." The girl laughed. "That means no?" Figures, Emily felt something crack inside her. Not anger, not even sadness. Just a deep ache, like something had been stepped on that was already broken. She wanted to leave the room, but she couldn't. She had to finish serving them, as she picked up empty plates from their table. One of the guys leaned toward her and said, "You know, you could have done better with your life. Like, at least be a hostess. You'd look better standing than running around like a dog." That one hit deep. Emily blinked and nodded, then walked away again. Yes, she couldn't take much more of this night. But she had to survive a little longer. Later, when they finally asked for the bill, one girl said, "We'll give a tip, but only if she sings a song for us." Emily looked at her with wide eyes. "I'm kidding," she said with a smirk. "We wouldn't want to hear that." More laughter. Louder this time. Even the people at the next table noticed and looked uncomfortable. After they left the restaurant, it felt lighter, like someone had opened a window. Emily began clearing the table quickly. Her hands were fast, but her eyes were wet. Not tears, not really, just tiredness. She was tired of being invisible, tired of being mocked, tired of being silent. She looked at the piano again. For a second, just a second, she imagined herself sitting there and playing. Not for the rude people. Not for money. Just to remind herself she could still do it, that she still had something beautiful inside her, that she wasn't just a waitress. But the night was over. She had tables to clean, tips to count, and trash to take out. That's how her days always ended, with the music still locked inside her. And no one knowing who she really was, but that would soon change. The night after the rude group came and mocked Emily, things at the restaurant returned to normal. The tables were full, the kitchen was busy, and the waiters moved quickly to serve the customers. Emily came to work on time, wearing the same uniform, her hair neatly tied back, and that small, quiet smile on her face. No one could tell she had cried a little the night before, or that she had trouble sleeping. She had learned how to hide her feelings. After all, waitresses weren't supposed to feel too much. They were supposed to serve and smile. That dusty old piano still stood in the corner of the restaurant, just like it always had. It had become part of the furniture now, something you saw but never touched. The restaurant owner had bought it years ago when the place first opened, thinking live music would bring more customers. For a few months, someone used to come and play soft background music. But then the pianist left, and no one bothered hiring another one. The piano stayed, slowly collecting dust. Now it was more of a decoration than an instrument. Emily had always noticed it. Every time she passed by the corner, she would glance at the piano. Sometimes her fingers would twitch with muscle memory, remembering how the keys once felt under her skin. Her body hadn't forgotten what her mind had tried to bury, but she never went near it. That was a different world, a world she had left behind when life had become difficult. Playing the piano used to be her dream, her joy, her escape. Now it felt like a secret only she remembered. One evening, the restaurant was slower than usual. Only a few tables were full. The speakers played quietly and the mood was calm. Emily had just finished serving a couple and was wiping down a table when she heard two of her coworkers talking near the counter. "Why don't we bring some life into this place?" one of them said, laughing. "You mean like music? We've got that piano just sitting there, collecting cobwebs." The manager, Mr. Larson, overheard the conversation and chuckled. "Well, if anyone here knows how to play it, they can go ahead. Might make the guests stay longer." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Mr. Larson wasn't being serious. He was joking, but still, the idea lingered in the air. Her hands suddenly felt warm. She looked at the piano again. It was so close, so silent, so forgotten. Her coworkers laughed and shook their heads. I can barely play a recorder, forget a piano. What about you, Emily? One of them asked playfully. You look like you could play something? Emily froze. She smiled shyly and said, I used to play. Long time ago. Mr. Larson raised an eyebrow. Really? You any good? Emily shrugged. I don't know. It's been years. Then maybe now's a good time to find out, he said, half-dash joking. The others laughed again. But Emily felt something stir inside her. She turned toward the piano and stared at it. Her heart was beating fast. She could feel it in her throat. In her fingertips. She didn't plan to say anything else. But before she knew it, her mouth opened. Can I try? The room went quiet for a moment. Mr. Larson looked surprised. You serious? Only if it's okay. He waved his hand. Sure. Knock yourself out. The few customers in the restaurant turned to look. Waitress playing the piano. This could be interesting. Emily wiped her hands on her apron. Her legs felt shaky as she walked toward the piano. It felt like a long walk, like crossing into another version of herself, one she hadn't seen in years. The air around her seemed thicker, the lights brighter. Her palms were sweaty, and she could feel all eyes on her. She sat down slowly on the old wooden bench. The piano felt cold under her fingers. She pressed one key gently. It worked. A soft note rang out, a little out of tune, but still clear. She placed her fingers on the keys, took a deep breath, and closed her eyes. She didn't know what she was going to play. She hadn't planned it. She didn't even know if she remembered anything, but her hands did. The music was buried deep. Inside her muscles, it had been waiting all these years, quietly sleeping, and then she started to play. At first the sound was soft and unsure, but then, like magic, it grew stronger. Her fingers found the keys like old friends meeting again. She played a piece she had learned when she was 12, something slow, gentle, and full of emotion. The notes floated through the restaurant like a warm wind. The conversation stopped. The forks and knives were set down. People turned in their seats to watch her. Emily didn't open her eyes. She let the music lead her. Her body remembered. The rhythm, the melody, the way each note connected to the next. She was no longer the tired waitress with sore feet and a forced smile. She was Emily the pianist, Emily the dreamer. Emily who used to sit at her old piano for hours, lost in music. When she finished the first song, there was silence for a moment. Then someone clapped, then another. And soon the whole room was applauding. Emily looked up, surprised. Her face turned red, but she smiled.
Ow.
It was a real smile, deep, joyful, and full of life. She hadn't felt like this in years. Play another one, someone shouted from a table. Emily looked at the manager. He nodded with a small smile. Go ahead, she played again. This time it was something different, something she had written. Herself when she was 16, it was a sad song, full of hope and heartbreak. As the notes moved through the air, a woman at one of the tables wiped away a tear. A man leaned forward, completely focused, like he was watching a miracle. Emily was. In a different world now? Every note she played told a story she hadn't been able to speak. All the pain, the loss, the dreams she gave up, it was all there. Hidden in the music. By the time she finished, the whole restaurant was silent. Then once again, they clapped. Louder this time. Some stood up and clapped. Even her coworkers were. Amazed. Where did that come from? One of them whispered. Emily laughed softly. She didn't know how to answer. It had always been there, just waiting for a chance to be heard again. As she stood up from the bench, her hands were trembling. But not from fear, from relief, from happiness. For the first time in a long time, she had shown the world who she really was. Mr. Larson walked over and said, "You're not just good, you're amazing. Why didn't you tell us before?" Emily smiled. I guess I forgot who I was for a while. That night, something changed. Not just in the restaurant, but inside Emily. The piano, the music, the feeling it, all came back to her like a wave. She had hidden her dream for so long, thinking it was gone forever. But it hadn't died. It had just been waiting for the right moment, the right place, the right song. She went home that night, feeling lighter. Her steps were quicker, her eyes brighter. She told her mother what happened, and for the first time in months, they laughed together. The next day, a video started spreading online. Someone had recorded her playing. The caption said, "Waitress shocks everyone by playing piano like a..." Pro comments started pouring in. People asked, who is she? Where did she learn? Why is she working as a waitress? Emily had no idea her life was about to change completely. She had simply wanted to remember what music felt like, but now the world was listening, and this time no one was laughing. The restaurant was no longer the same place. Something had changed since Emily played the piano that night. People still came for the food, but now they looked at the piano with new eyes. It wasn't just an old decoration in the corner anymore. It was a part of the story. And everyone who had been there that night told others what they saw. A few guests had recorded her playing and posted the videos online. In those clips, Emily looked calm, her eyes closed, her hands moving over the keys like they had been born. For it, the sound wasn't perfect, the piano was old, the recording wasn't clear, but something in the way she played touched people deeply at first. Emily didn't even know her performance had been recorded. The next morning, she was sweeping the restaurant floor before opening time when one of the younger waiters, Jonah, ran in, holding his phone. "You're going viral," he said, grinning. Emily blinked. "What do you mean?"
Ow.
He showed her a video. On his screen, it was her playing the piano. Her fingers danced across the keys as the soft music floated through the room. The video already had over 30,000 views. There were hundreds of comments. "Waitress or concert pianist? Can someone sign her already? This is better than most artists I've seen live." She stared at the phone in silence. She didn't know what to feel: shocked, nervous, or excited. Maybe all three. Later that afternoon, more customers came in than usual. Many of them weren't regulars. They kept looking at her as if trying to figure out if she was the girl from the video. Some of them whispered and pointed toward the piano. When Mr. Larson, the manager, walked in, he looked more surprised than anyone else. "Emily, your name is all over the internet," he said, holding his own phone. "You've been shared on 3 local news pages. Someone even tagged a famous pianist." Emily felt her heart racing. All this attention, it didn't feel real. She wasn't used to being seen. For years, she had blended into the background. She had worked quietly, done her job, and gone home. Now strangers were talking about her like she was someone special. By evening, the restaurant was full. Some guests asked if she would play again. Others just waited and watched. Emily felt pressure in her chest, but she also felt something else: courage. She realized that maybe she had been afraid for too long, afraid to try, afraid to hope. After she finished her regular shift, she slowly walked over to the piano again. This time, people clapped even before she played. She sat down, took a deep breath, and let her fingers move. She played a soft jazz piece first, letting the notes flow like water. Then she played a slower, emotional tune that she had written in her notebook years ago. She had never shared it with anyone before. Now it was time. As she played, the restaurant grew silent again. Forks stopped moving. People leaned forward. A couple in the corner held hands and closed their eyes. Even the kitchen staff peeked. Out to listen, her music had power. It didn't shout. It whispered to people's hearts. It reminded them of things they had forgotten: childhood dreams, lost loved ones, quiet hopes. Her fingers told stories without words. When she finished, the applause was even louder than before. Someone shouted, "You belong on a big stage," and others nodded. One man walked up to her after and said, "You made me cry. I didn't think a stranger could do that." Emily felt her eyes well up. She thanked him, but deep inside, she still couldn't believe this was happening. The next day, her video crossed 500,000 views. News reporters began calling the restaurant. One local TV channel sent a journalist to interview her. They asked her how she learned to play, and she told them the truth. She had started piano lessons as a child, practiced every day, dreamed of becoming a musician, but life had other plans. Her father got sick, they lost money, and she had to stop playing. She took a job as a waitress to help her mother. The piano had become a silent memory. The journalist wrote the story with the headline, "Waitress who gave up her dreams stuns city with piano performance. More people started showing up at the restaurant, not just to eat, but to hear her play. They waited until her shift ended. They asked for songs. Some brought flowers. A woman who worked at a local music school approached her one evening and said, "You shouldn't be playing here. You should be performing in a theater." Emily smiled. "This is where I found my music again," but not everyone was kind. Online comments were negative. "She's good, but not that good. Probably fakes someone else's playing in the background. Let's see how she does on a real stage." But Emily had faced worse in life. She didn't let the rude people steal her joy. She had been mocked before by people who didn't know her story, her pain, or her strength. But this time, she had something they couldn't take from her: confidence. One evening, as she finished playing her third song for the night, someone familiar walked into the restaurant. It was one of the rich girls from the rude group that had mocked her the first time. Emily recognized her instantly. The girl looked uncomfortable, her face half hidden under a baseball cap. She didn't laugh this time. She sat quietly at a corner table and watched. Emily didn't let it bother her. She played again, stronger than before. When she finished, she stood up and walked back to her station. The girl came over slowly and said, "I just wanted to say, you're really talented. I didn't know." Emily looked at her calmly. "Didn't ask." The girl nodded and walked away. It wasn't an apology, but it was enough. Emily didn't need their approval anymore. Days passed, then weeks. Emily was no longer just a waitress. She was being invited to perform at small community concerts, school events, and even a local charity show. Her name was known now not for how she served water or took orders, but for the music she brought into people's lives. One evening, a man in a black suit walked into the restaurant during her piano set. He sat quietly, listened to every song, and left without saying anything. The next day, she received a letter in the mail. It was from a well-known music academy. They were offering her a full scholarship. Emily couldn't believe it. She read the letter 3 times. She showed it to her mother, who cried and hugged her tightly. All those years of struggle, silence, sacrifice were finally leading somewhere beautiful. She spoke with Mr. Larson and explained everything. He smiled and said, "You were never just a waitress, Emily. You just didn't know how bright you could shine." He kept her job open just in case she needed it again. But he also placed a plaque above the restaurant piano that said, "The piano." That found its voice, again thanks to Emily. And just like that, the girl who once cleaned tables and was laughed at by strangers became a symbol of hidden talent, quiet strength, and the power of never giving up on your dreams. But her journey was far from over. Emily's life was changing fast. Every day felt like a new chapter of a story she'd never thought she'd live. A few weeks ago, she was just another tired waitress, working long hours, saving money, and trying to stay unnoticed. Now, people greeted her by name. Strangers came just to hear her music, and offers were starting to come in from places she never imagined. The music school that sent her the scholarship letter called again, asking when she could start. Her hands trembled as she held the phone, listening to the voice on the other end say words like potential, gifted, and future concerts. She could hardly believe it was real. She said yes, of course. The school was nearby, only 2 bus rides away. They allowed her to start with evening classes so she could still work during the day. Mr. Larson, her manager at the restaurant, agreed to reduce her shifts and promised to support her as much as he could. Emily was nervous when she entered the music school for the first time. It was a beautiful building, full of tall windows, echoing hallways, and pianos that were perfectly tuned. Everyone there seemed confident, experienced, and talented. At first, she felt out of place. She wore the same simple clothes. Her hands were rough from years of work, and she hadn't practiced reading music in a long time. But something happened. When she sat down at the piano, the keys felt familiar. Her body relaxed, and her hands moved naturally. It was like coming home. Her teacher, a kind older woman named Mrs. Caldwell, watched her closely during the first class. When Emily finished playing a piece from memory, the teacher smiled gently and said, "You're not just talented. You feel the music? That's rare." Emily blushed. Praise still felt strange to her, but deep down she was proud. Years when she thought her talent was gone, it had just been sleeping inside her, waiting for the right time to wake up. Every evening after class, she would come home tired but full of joy. She practiced late into the night on an old electric keyboard someone donated after seeing her story online. It wasn't a real piano, but it was enough to keep her fingers moving and her heart full. Back at the restaurant, her music had become part of the routine. Some customers would ask when she would play, and they planned their dinners around her schedule. Tourists who had seen her viral video showed up, hoping to catch her live. Emily didn't play every day, but when she did, the room would fall silent. People listened, not just with their ears, but with their hearts. Even the rude table from weeks ago, the group who had once mocked her, seemed like a distant memory. They had disappeared after her video went viral. But one night, something unexpected happened. One of the girls from that group, the one who had dropped her fork on purpose, returned. She came alone this time and sat at a table near the back. Emily saw her and immediately remembered everything. But she didn't say anything. She served her just like any other customer, politely, calmly. After dinner, when Emily sat down at the piano and played, the girl watched silently. She didn't laugh. She didn't record. She simply sat there listening. And when the song ended, she walked up to Emily and said, "I was awful to you that night. I'm sorry." Emily looked into her eyes. She saw something different this time. Not pride, not cruelty, but shame. And she nodded. "Thank you," she said. It was enough. Emily didn't hold on to hate. She had moved forward, and now others were following. One night, after a special dinner event at the restaurant, a man approached her. He had gray hair, glasses, and a kind smile. He had been sitting in the corner all night, quietly listening. When Emily stood up from the piano, he clapped slowly, then introduced himself. "My name is Victor Lang," he said. "I'm the director of the downtown concert hall. We're holding a charity event next month to raise money for young musicians who can't afford lessons. I'd like you to perform." Emily was speechless. She had never been invited to a real concert before, especially not one held in a famous venue. She nodded slowly and whispered, "Yes, I'd love to." The next few weeks passed in a blur. She practiced harder than ever. Her teacher helped her choose 2 songs, one classical and one original. She wanted to show her roots, but also who she had become. Her classmates at the music school were supportive and excited for her. Even the chef at the restaurant started humming her tunes in the kitchen. On the night of the concert, Emily stood backstage wearing a simple black dress. Her hands were cold. Her heart beat loudly in her ears. She peeked through the curtain and saw the seats filling up. The lights were bright. The stage looked huge. Mrs. Caldwell came up behind her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You belong here," she said softly. Emily nodded. Then she walked onto the stage. The lights hit her face, and for a second she froze. But then she looked at the grand piano in front of her. It was shining, waiting. She walked over, sat down, took a deep breath, and placed her hands on the keys. The first piece was a classical song she had learned as a child.
Ow!
Her fingers moved smoothly. The notes floated across the room like feathers. She could feel the crowd leaning in, listening, connecting. Every note told a story of sacrifice, of struggle, of survival. When she finished, there was silence for a moment. Then the applause came, strong, loud, honest. She bowed, stood up, then sat back down for her second piece. "This next song," she said into the microphone, her voice shaking slightly, "I wrote during a very hard time in my life. I didn't think anyone would ever hear it, but here I am. And here you are. Thank you." She played her original piece. It was soft, emotional, and full of both pain and hope. People in the audience closed their eyes. Some wiped tears from their cheeks. Others held hands or hugged. It wasn't just a performance. It was a connection. When the last note faded, the applause returned, this time louder. Standing ovation. Emily stood, bowed again, and smiled a real wide, proud smile. After the concert, people came to meet her, musicians, teachers, reporters, even young students. They wanted to know her story, ask questions, take pictures. She tried not to feel overwhelmed, but it was hard to believe this was her life now. That same night, a talent scout approached her with an offer to record an album. Another woman asked if Emily would consider doing a small tour of local schools to inspire kids who came from poor backgrounds like she did. Emily didn't say yes right away. She wanted to think carefully. But inside, she knew this was only the beginning. When she went home that night, her mother was waiting up for her, sitting on the sofa with the TV still on. She had watched the concert online. "You looked like your father when you played," her mother said. Eyes wet, Emily sat beside her, rested her head on her shoulder and said, "I think I'm going to be okay." She was. She still worked. A few days a week at the restaurant, she said it kept her grounded. The plaque above the piano was still there. People still asked about the night she first played. And sometimes, when the restaurant was quiet, she would sit down and play again for the love of it. She didn't play to prove anything anymore. She didn't need to be better than anyone. She just wanted to share what was in her heart. Her journey wasn't about being famous. It was about remembering who she was, helping others remember who they could be too. And as for the people who had once laughed at her, or mocked her, or looked down on her, they had become part of her. Story 2. Not as villains, but as reminders of how far she had come. Because sometimes, the world tries to shrink people down, to tell them they're only good for carrying plates or staying quiet in the background. But Emily had shown that greatness can be hidden in plain sight. And when it finally rises, it doesn't just surprise people, it inspires them. Emily's journey had taken her far from the quiet waitress she once was. Now, she was no longer just a girl serving food in a small restaurant. She was a musician with a future that glowed bright with promise. It had not been easy. It was filled with struggle, heartbreak, and moments when she wanted to give up. Yet here she was, standing on a stage, ready to show the world her true self. After the concert hall performance, Emily's life changed even more. Invitations came pouring in. Local newspapers wrote stories about her. People sent messages of support from all over the country. Some talked about her courage, others about her talent. She began to understand that her story was more than just about music. It was about hope, about never giving up, even when life seemed unfair. One afternoon, Emily received a call from a big music producer in the city. He had seen her videos and wanted to help her record an album. The thought was exciting, but scary. She wasn't sure if she was ready for the spotlight that came with it. But deep inside, she knew that this was a chance she couldn't ignore. With her mother's blessing and encouragement, Emily agreed to meet the producer. The studio was large and filled with bright lights, microphones, and instruments. For the first time, Emily sat in a room designed to capture her music, her voice, and her emotions. The producer listened carefully as she played her songs, smiled and said, "You have something real, Emily. People will want to hear you." Recording wasn't easy. It took long hours and many tries. Sometimes she made mistakes and felt frustrated. But every time she reminded herself why she was doing it. Not for fame or money, but to share the music she had hidden for so long. To tell her story without words, only through melody. Meanwhile, life at home was quieter, but no less important. Her mother was proud, but sometimes worried. She had seen how hard Emily worked and how much pressure came with being the piano girl. But she never said no to her daughter's dreams. She believed in Emily, even when Emily doubted herself. At the restaurant, things had settled too. The plaque above the piano remained, a reminder of the night everything changed. The owner, Mr. Larson, still smiled whenever he saw Emily. He told the other staff to treat her like a star, because she was one now. Yet Emily still visited sometimes, not just to work, but to say hello to old friends and remember where she came from. One day Emily was invited to speak at a local school. The principal asked her to share her story with students who might be struggling at first. She hesitated. Public speaking was not easy for her, but she accepted the invitation. wanting to inspire others the way she had been inspired. Standing in front of a crowded classroom, Emily looked at the young faces filled with curiosity, hope, and doubt. She told them about the hard times, the days when she wanted to give up, and the people who laughed at her. But most importantly, she told them about the music, the power it had to heal, to give strength, and to remind you who you really are. After her talk, students came up to her. With smiles and tears, one boy said, "You made me believe I can do something too." A girl said, "Thank you for showing me it's okay to dream." Emily realized that her story was more than just her own. It was a light for others lost in darkness. As the years passed, Emily's career grew steadily. She performed at concerts, recorded more music, and even taught piano lessons to children who couldn't afford them. She started a small foundation to help young musicians from poor families get instruments and lessons. She remembered her own struggles and wanted to make the path easier for others. Though her life was busier and more public, Emily never forgot her roots. She stayed humble, kind, and true to herself. The memories of those early days, being mocked by rude customers, hiding her talent and working hard, were a constant reminder of how far she had come. One evening, back at the restaurant where it all began, Emily was invited to play for a special anniversary event. The place was packed with old and new friends, customers, and fans. She sat at the piano, looked around at the faces smiling back at her, and felt a deep sense of peace. As her fingers moved across the keys, the music filled the room with warmth and hope. It was a story without words, a story of courage, resilience, and the magic that happens when someone dares to believe in themselves. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. People cheered not just for the music, but for the journey that brought her there. Emily smiled, knowing this was only the beginning. The girl who had once been ignored and mocked had found her voice, and she would keep sharing it one note at a time.